Kyle,
Dave,
how's it going, buddy?
going, man. How are you?
I'm living the dream. It's been definitely it's been too long.
Yeah, it absolutely has. We've delayed much longer than we needed to, but would you like to share at the podcast? You had a very important life event take place, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I guess not so recently, but recently my wife gave birth to our second daughter, second child overall. Uh, my wife pushed her out like a champ, 12 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
I don't think I knew that.
yeah, it was in honor of Aaron Rodgers actually.
See, that's how committed your family is to the Packers cause, is
Yeah.
that even your wife in labor supports the green and gold.
Yeah. No, 12 wanted out, and that's how it worked out. So,
Yeah. Well, congratulations to you. Congratulations to your wife. I know that
sir.
I've said it for the purposes of the podcast, sir. Congratulations very much. We all wish you and your family the best.
Thank you. And our three listeners, hopefully they understand why we haven't been able to cast lately.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of a delay, and I think that's something that we can work with the off season. It's just starting to pick up finally. There hasn't been a ton of big news, and some stuff we'll get here to or get to here in a minute, but there hasn't been too much on the horizon. Just the kind of the team drama stuff so far. Who's out? Who's in? The
Everybody is
franchise.
out.
There are a lot of options out there, and obviously that makes it exciting with the draft. Are people going to get dealt in the draft, or like I guess in reference to the draft for draft picks? That's always a curveball with these drafts. Is watching guys get dealt during or before, just so teams can make space for somebody else or whatever the case is. So it'll be an interesting little offseason period here as we transition into draft and then some probably pretty big trade block stuff coming up here.
Yeah. No, it's definitely it's going to be interesting if we're recording this on a Saturday right before next Wednesday is technically when free agency starts. Legal tampering begins Monday though, so most of the big name deals are already going to be done by Monday, and they're going to be announced and leaked and all that. Really, Wednesday is more of a formality than anything. Honestly, it's technically legal tampering. Most of the conversations and talks have already happened or happening during the combine or whatever. So a lot of deals are already in place. It just hasn't been made official yet. So lot going to be happening in either Green Bay or just throughout the NFL. Rob Domowski recently, Green Bay Packers ESPN analyst, he was saying that the Packers are going to be big spenders in free agency this year. Not sure if that's true. It's always rumor mill, but Domowski's typically got his ear to everything. So if he thinks that the Packers are going to be out there spending, I think that's going to end up happening. Kyle, I see an earthquake's happening at your house right now.
Yes, I'm experiencing a Wisconsin earthquake. They're very rare, but I'm also very off center at the moment, so
Yeah,
I
no,
apologize. Trying to get myself resituated here. I'm sorry.
it happens. Honestly, free agency does that to me too, where it will rock my world. Back when Ted Thompson was GM, not so much. it was pretty still. Not really a whole lot till the draft, but since old Gutekunst came in, we've gotten quite a number of free agents so far.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a shift. I think that it's a necessity for the Packers and free agency this year, particularly just because there's some very strong defensive needs that we've talked about very heavily throughout the season. And if the Packers are going to have a shot at making a run for it legitimately against some of the NFC talent that's out there, they're going to need a defense that can withstand some blows. So we'll see what happens. So before we get too ahead of ourselves into the draft stuff, because I know that we're both fans of that. You so more than me, historically speaking. But this year, I'm trying to get a lot more into it, pay attention to who's on the board, what guys I like, what guys I don't. And I still have a lot more to explore with that this year. And we can talk about some guys that you like and players that you're very high on. But let's wrap up because we haven't done a podcast since the end of the year when we kind of did predictions for the end of the playoffs, and then we had some stuff relating to the Super Bowl. Now, Dave, really, I was just tallying throughout the season, um, wins and the individual basis for scores. But before the year ended, we did a Super Bowl prediction, and I had Lions versus Bills. I will be the first to admit to you that I was extremely wrong.
Yep.
You had even told me that the Lions are going to Lion when it came to playoff time, and the Lions certainly did Lion, and they didn't even end up
You ain't
getting
lying.
as close as I wanted them to be. I told you that the Commanders were going to be a problem,
Yeah, you
um,
did.
but I still had a very hard time picking the Commanders over the Lions when it came down to it, just because the Lions team was so incredibly advanced. But uh, anyway, let's move past that. So I had the Bills winning it all versus the Lions. Again, I was very wrong. So we're gonna just scrap everything that I predicted at that point. It wasn't Josh Allen's year, even though he got the MVP. Uh, so good for him. I think that he's a player that really is going to look back on his career at the end of it, and it's going to be not a waste at all. I think he's just kind of living in Patrick Mahomes' shadow as far as success, but he's going to be a guy that's always was just that next best to Patrick Mahomes a lot of his career. And that's just a tough place to be, I think, for him. Hopefully, he stays motivated and doesn't like look for a way out into a different division or something like that for a change of scenery. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was on the horizon eventually, because he's a very talented quarterback.
I kind of disagree with you on that. I think that yes, anybody's living in Patrick Mahomes' shadow right now, just because how many Super Bowls is it now he's been to? 5 of the last 6 years. He's won 3 of them. He's lost 2. I think that if you're going off of really like the Brady timeline, Brady went to a lot of his Super Bowls early. He didn't lose one early on, but he ended up going to a few. And then there was a good span there for about 7, 8 years where he didn't end up going to a Super Bowl. So, and that happens to any team. I feel like the Chiefs, when you even look at their salary cap situation and who they can retain, who they can't retain, like a lot of their contract space is being ate up by a couple of players, whether it be Chris Jones, Travis Kelsey, Patrick Mahomes. Like, there's guys there that are like major players eating up a lot of room that I feel like Kansas City's going to have to nickel and dime a lot and kind of crawl through salary cap hell for the next few years. So, granted, Patrick Mahomes always turns it on in the playoffs, so you never know. But from a Josh Allen perspective, I don't think that he stays out of the Super Bowl picture forever. I think that he ends up getting 1, maybe 2, maybe not so much win, but at least he makes it to the Super Bowl. And I don't think that you can be dominant to the point of I don't see Patrick Mahomes having a 20-year career and he goes to the Super Bowl 18 times. That's not going to happen. And just based off of who's the better teams, at some point Patrick Mahomes isn't going to get there. So then where do you go off of from there? Is it Joe Burrow? Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Josh Allen? Because there's quality quarterbacks, and I mean Justin Herbert, Tua, you can pick a lot of different teams. Granted, there's some that would have to make major shifts, but as we've seen, one or two draft classes can completely change the game, completely change your foundation completely. It all depends on what ends up happening. Now, I don't think that forever he's going to live in a shadow. I just think that it's going to be one of those things. He'll be known as one of the best, like Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is known as one of the best, but was he as successful as Tom Brady? No. Nobody was as successful except for now Patrick Mahomes. So I say give it a little bit of time. I don't give up on Josh Allen quite yet.
Yeah, I'm not. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you're wrong. I just say that the living in the shadow thing has been his career thus far,
Yeah,
and hopefully for him, like I like Josh Allen a lot. I think that he's incredibly talented, and like you're saying, I think that he's probably going to end up being one of the best of all time when it comes down to it. It's just simply at this point in his career, he hasn't been able to surpass the Chiefs, or the Bills haven't, as an organization, really surpassed the Chiefs in terms of total talent and ability to kind of make that final push to where they can win it all. So we'll definitely see where they end up. Josh Allen, like I said, best of luck to him. He's definitely one where I'd be rooting for him. So long as it's not against the Green Bay Packers in the Super Bowl, from just a team preference type standpoint, I think I'd like to see him get one. So,
yeah,
but not before Jordan Love. I'd like to see him get one first.
yeah. Jordan Love has
Um,
to win at least 2 or 3 himself, so
yeah,
not a whole
yeah,
lot of
Josh
room.
Allen, take your time getting there for sure. But
Yeah,
when you do, and it's not if it's not against the Packers, we'll we'll cheer you on.
He can pull an
Um,
Elway at the end, you know.
so it sounds like actually, well, it doesn't sound like I'm looking at it right here in my notes, but
Yeah,
it looks like to me, Dave, that you had a Eagles versus Ravens Super Bowl, and that's I mean that's as close as it gets to a correct prediction. To be quite honest with you, the Chiefs at the end of the day just pushed their way through, as we knew that they very well quite possibly could. They end up in the Super Bowl with the Eagles, and man, without getting crazy in depth analysis wise over the Super Bowl itself, I was shocked by the outcome. Not that the Eagles won necessarily, because I thought they were on a tear, um, but just that it was as much of a gap, as it was in that game. And I thought that there was just so many good things for the Eagles that went right in that game. Went wrong right off the bat. I thought that was kind of a nonsense offensive PI to kind of start, and I was like, well, this might be kind of a ticky tacky, wishy washy type game as far as refereeing goes. And then it just kind of was wide open for the Eagles after that, and it just seemed like the Chiefs came out flat. I don't know if it's like the hangover of like, man, we've been here so many times, so it doesn't mean anything to us or as much to us on this stage anymore. We'll see how they respond this next year and kind of go from there. I don't think that they're just going to fall off and suddenly be a losing record type organization, especially with Andy Reid as a coach and Patrick Mahomes leading that offense. I think they're probably going to look to acquire some kind of wide receiver talent. That would be my big concern for me if I was a Chiefs fan, is getting somebody who can reliably catch the ball now that Travis Kelce is slowing down. But certainly going back to the Super Bowl, I thought that they kind of left it wide open for the taking, and it was not a very even level of display for talent in that game. Both teams are incredibly talented, but the Eagles just played a very, very good football game at the end of the day, and congratulations to them, even though their city sucks.
yeah. No, as I have said, I love the city of Philadelphia. I think that they're amazing people. I think that amazing team, amazing town. They did it the right way. They built up in the trenches throughout the years. They've had amazing offensive lines. They've had amazing defensive lines, and they kind of. One thing that I can always say about certain teams is when they do have down years, they draft well. And I feel like that's been one thing that Green Bay has kind of struggled on because when we do have picks that are near the top 10, typically we haven't really hit the most. You look at back to when we drafted Rashawn Gary. Rashawn Gary, there were guys available at that slot. They could have gotten Brian Burns. They could have gotten Jeffrey Simmons, arguably better players than Gary. And not that Gary's a bad player. He's very, very good. But I would rate him on that second tier of pass rushers, or even possibly the third tier pass rushers. And then you look at the LVN, where you could have gotten a Christian Gonzalez, or you could have gotten a JSN. There were guys available at those spots that Packers just went for their guys, and they haven't always hit. And granted, that's going to happen sometimes. You're not always going to hit 100, but you look when the Eagles had down years, they picked Jalen Carter. They had Jordan Davis fall to them. They were able to build that offensive line throughout the years. It kind of reminds me of the 49ers, how the 49ers, any year they had a down year, they would get a Nick Bosa, and they would get, uh, those high picks that really just nailed and made them over the top. And I feel like Green Bay, not so much has been in that type of circumstance. So good job on the Eagles. And Saquon Barkley, I think it will forever live in infamy of the whole situation with the Giants, where the GM of the Giants said, I'm not paying $40 million for a quarterback to hand off the ball to a $12 million back. I think it's funny now because this season there's been Hard Knocks have been trying to get teams for their offseason Hard Knocks, and every single team has declined. Nobody wants eggs on their face, just like the Giants had last year. So
Yeah, that's a tough one to stomach if you're, as an organization. I mean, the Giants' organization already isn't the best organization. If when you look back, like the most noticeable quarterback and like receiver that they've had are probably Odell Beckham and before Neighbors, probably, to be honest with you. I think that kid's a pretty instant success in the NFL, and he'll continue to be good for a while. No matter who's throwing the football, he's going to be an elite talent. But um, either way, if you're looking back as far as talent acquisition goes, like Eli Manning and Odell Beckham Jr. are probably the two best players they've had on that team within the last, I don't know, I mean on the offensive side of the ball. Like obviously there's a Michael Strahans and stuff in the world that used to play for the Giants that are very talented people. Probably like, is he a Hall of Famer already?
Yeah, I believe so. Well,
Yeah.
and I
So
mean, the Giants way back, they had Jeremy Shockey, they had Toomer, they had Plexico Burris. Plexico Burris was so explosive that he literally shot himself. So, like, it's
everything about him was explosive.
everything. But they they've had guys, but yeah, no, I stand by what you said. Where recently, yeah, that has been their best players, and they do have young guys. But Saquon Barkley, that's knowing how it all worked out. That's got to be the biggest, one of the biggest flops
Yeah,
in
what
NFL
a
history.
year for Saquon, man. What a huge year for him. Like all rivalries and NFC divisional stuff aside, like what an incredible year for him. Pretty humble guy, didn't really go after the NFL record, wasn't pressing, wasn't ignorant about it. Just kind of went with what the coaching staff wanted to do. In that last game when they kind of sat him on the bench and said, "Hey, we're going to rest you up," and I get the reason for that. But what a humble guy in the process. Good for him. I'm glad he's in a team in an organization where he can have some success. He's won a ring now. He certainly deserved it. He's recovered from injury. He's had faced a lot of adversity in his career. So good for him.
Yep.
Hopefully that's the last successful time that he has anything even mildly successful against the Green Bay Packers. He can rush for 200 against everybody else. I don't care. But hopefully
Fingers crossed.
for Green Bay's sake, we keep that to a minimum. All right. So looking ahead to the draft, Dave, and this is a kind of lengthy topic that will probably be on for a while during this podcast, and um, you know, just going back for a second to what you said about Green Bay and how we draft. Typically, we've drafted our guys rather than the guys, and what I mean by that, I'm sure you understand what I'm getting at here, but like. Green Bay hasn't been the organization over the years that's taken the names when they're available on the board. They're very particular about who they want, why they want them, and kind of taking the chance if it's going to pan out for the team in the long run. We had chances I felt like very feasibly to trade up and get a Justin Jefferson type player, and we didn't do that. We had opportunities to get a TJ Watt, and we didn't do that. There are guys that are difference makers in their organizations now that the Packers had a reasonable shot at picking up in the draft, and they've stuck to their guns, and that's kind of who we've been over the years. The question that everybody has looking ahead to this draft for the Green Bay Packers is that going to change this year when arguably your number one pick should be spent on two things: one, an edge rusher, or two, an elite wide receiver. And, like there's all this argument back and forth about are the Packers going to spend the first rounder on a wide receiver? And I'll let you give your spiel in a minute and your thoughts on that. But like looking ahead to the draft, like I would encourage a lot of the Packers fans that are going to watch this to think to themselves, don't expect that there's going to be some kind of sudden shift in the organization where we're suddenly going to nab up this round one wide receiver. Not that I'm not hoping for it, not that I wouldn't love for us to do that. I think there's a couple viable options for the Green Bay Packers to do that, depending on how people fall, who's available when we pick. And don't think that Green Bay doesn't maybe have a backup plan for that, but I think that they have their guy in mind going into this draft, and I don't expect it to be a wide receiver. And I don't even expect it necessarily to be an edge rusher. Um, I expect it to be three things: a corner, an edge rusher, or a wide receiver, depending on how things go. But I would say wide receiver is probably dead last in that list. If I'm the Green Bay Packers organization, just historically speaking, would I love to see them take a Matthew Golden from Texas? Like, yep, absolutely. Me and you talked about that a little bit. And Ibuka from Ohio State. Like, I think that would be phenomenal. Apparently, Matthew Golden had a very good combine, so people are very high on him, which doesn't bode well for the Green Bay Packers picking him when we get up at the 23rd pick this year. So I don't think that Matthew Golden's going to last on that board. But I think that Ibuka is much more obtainable. It just depends, what they're trying to do. Um, and I think originally in the mock draft that I did, I think Ibuka was very likely going to be picked by the Washington Commanders, but um, with the acquisition now with the Commanders having Debo, I think it's probably less likely that they go wide receiver in the first round. So that to me would be somewhere where who needs this wide receiver in that kind of 5 to 6 team buffer where the Green Bay Packers are sitting, and I could see Kansas City taking him. To be quite honest with you, I could see that being a thing. But I don't see anybody else. So really, in the bold scheme of things, I'm going to circle back to give you an opportunity to speak on what positionally you think this is going to be for the Green Bay Packers. But positionally, maybe outside like a Tampa Bay Buccaneers who are losing a couple players this year at wide receiver, I don't really see a overwhelming need in this buffer that Green Bay is sitting in within the draft for a wide receiver. So like it's very feasible to me that a wide receiver may fall. It's just, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not.
Uh, going off of wide receiver, I think that it kind of gets caught up in the media where they talk about, oh, well, they haven't picked a number one, they haven't picked a wide receiver in the first round since Javon Walker out of Florida State way back. I think it was like 2002. But the thing is you look at a bunch of wide receivers that we've had. Was Devontae Adams not one of the best wide receivers in the league for his span in Green Bay? Was Jordy Nelson not one of the best in Green Bay during his span? Randall Cobb not one of the best? Donald Driver one of the best? Uh, James Jones not one of the best, but one of the better. So I feel like that almost feels like it's one of those things that the media is kind of made up. We when we did have need for wide receiver, there were your Justin Jeffersons, there were your Brandon Ayuk's, and they did try to go after Jefferson. He got picked way ahead. They weren't willing to make that trade up. Brandon Ayuk, he got sniped before they could draft him. That was the 49ers picked him up. The Packers were planning on getting Ayuk originally. And honestly, we wouldn't have had Jordan Love in that draft then. But Packers have had guys. Christian Watson. They wanted to pick Christian Watson in the first round, and the Vikings wouldn't trade their selection. Which then, ironically, they traded in the second round with the Vikings to move up to get Christian Watson. So, I think the Packers. It's not so much that they don't want a first round wide receiver. It's just the fact of their value and what they want to give up as to where the board falls hasn't lined up completely. So he does it this year. I think that looking at what the Packers need, there's one guy who I can really name that is what the Green Bay Packers need. Somebody who's a field stretcher, somebody who's a big guy that can go out there and get it, or a difference maker. So me personally, I think Ibuka out of Ohio State is a difference maker. But the problem is that for most of his college time, he lined up in the slot. He also did line up outside a little bit, but he was mostly a slot guy. Who we already have as slot guy, Jaden Reed. So it's hard to, are you going to play Ibuka strictly outside? If that's the case, which he can do. But at 23, do they pull the trigger? I don't know. Golden's another guy where he's 6 foot, he's solid, but he's fast.
Yeah,
But
what,
he
Matthew Golden's what, like 6'4"?
no, I believe he's only like 6 foot. He might be six
Oh,
one. No,
oh,
the guy,
you know what? I'm confusing him with. I looked up. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I looked up DK's stats the other day and his physical attributes, and I'm confusing that with that. I
yeah,
apologize.
yeah, DK is 6'4". Another player who's 6'4" is Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. Now he runs a 4.4. He is a difference maker. He's a guy that can go out there and he can get the 50-50 balls that I think that the Packers would need in the draft. But the problem is value wise, I don't know if he falls to the second round or not. And that's it. All it takes is just one team. So if you're the Packers, you
But
risk.
you're looking at quite a few limited teams that I could see really taking wide receivers pretty heavy in this draft, and I see the Raiders as one of those teams right now, just because they're kind of going to be in this. weird stage of the organization where they had a new head coach now, in Pete Carroll. Now you have the acquisition of Geno Smith in there, which kind of like spices it up a little bit, where it's maybe that they don't need, um, to go really heavy in on a quarterback right away. So that kind of changes things a little bit. Um, and so, you think about the Raiders might be taking a wide receiver. And I'm looking at the board just overall right now, and I'm seeing a lot of edge rushers, which are difference makers right off the bat. I mean, obviously, Abdul Carter is a monster. I mean, the guy's draft grades are just insane. His performance in college was insane. He's going to continue to be one of those difference makers no matter what team he goes to. And really, what is crazy to me is that Cleveland, if they can't, like, I'd be really pressing to try to work out something with Myles Garrett, because truly having Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett coming off of the edge would be an absolutely insane duo
Oh,
to
be
have on
careful.
your.
Abdul
And
Carter had a shoulder injury and almost beat Notre Dame single handedly in the college football playoff. I mean, the man's something special. I think that number one defensive player in this draft, probably number one overall, because I can't think of an offensive player either. I know a lot of guys love Travis Hunter. I like him, but I don't see him as being the number one guy. Abdul Carter, to me, he goes out there and he's going to be a guy that I'd be surprised if he didn't get double digit sacks immediately first year.
yeah, I see Abdul Carter, minus some kind of injury, being a huge difference maker right off the bat. And a lot of this is like pending on what happens here, with guys that are going to hit free agency, whatever trades are going to occur and stuff like that. So we have some stuff here that's probably still going to change on this initial board, but like just from what I'm seeing, like the Titans are going to need a quarterback, Dave. So they're picking number one. They're going to need a quarterback. They've opened the door for that with Will Levis struggling, and that I just don't think that Will Levis was going to be your franchise guy. And especially in this draft where there's so many question marks at the quarterback position, we're not talking about as strong of a draft class in the quarterback category that we've seen before. So we're talking about primarily for a quarterback play within the first round. You're looking at probably your Cam Ward at number one for the Titans. I don't think that would necessarily change. I think that people are pretty high on Cam Ward, and I think that he is a very good quarterback. Much better, obviously, even in his first year in the Titans organization than I think a Will Levis would ever be, or even I guess like if you're looking at the gap, even in a year of learning, like you're not that far ahead of where Cam Ward is right now with just his talent level, athletic ability, his legs, his arm strength, like all that stuff, like is stuff that I don't feel like Will Levis necessarily equates to. So I could very well see Cam Ward going at one. Um, and then even on this, like in this board that I have drafted up here, uh, the Giants for Shador, I think is absolutely feasible. I think that him and Neighbors duo would be kind of crazy. And then to see what kind of talent they add after that in this draft would be quite interesting to me, to be quite honest. But we'll see what happens with that. And then somewhere down the line, and I'm spacing on the kid's name right now. What is this kid out of Missouri, Dave? The quarterback out of Missouri.
Quarterback out of Missouri.
I believe it's out of Missouri.
They're
Uh, I'm blanking on the kid's name at the moment.
Missouri.
Uh,
From what I can think of, Missouri is Luther Burton, the wide receiver, and then I believe that they have a tackle, offensive tackle. That's
well, there's
Mambuko.
another like fairly successful quarterback that they've been talking about in the NFL Combine. I don't know. I'll have to refresh my
I've
memory here in a
seen
minute.
Jackson Dart out of Old Miss. I've seen
Not
I don't
him.
know, first round quarterback. There's I don't know. You got Will Howard out of Ohio State. You got I don't know. I'd have to look again myself. But
Yeah, I'll text you later or something. But either way, yeah, I think there's two, maybe three quarterbacks that go first round, just to get them out of the way for organizations that want to stow one or want one to start right away. And your Cam Wards and your Shooter Sanders type individuals are definitely your starters right away, and that's what these organizations want. But um, like in your round one expertise, Dave, you're looking for your difference maker. You're looking for your guy. You're looking for the guy that fits your immediate needs within the organization. Um, and it seems like the Packers really have three positional options for that. Like I said, to me, I think personally that's edge rusher probably first in the priority category. Probably even corner second, and then wide receiver as a close third. Do you disagree with kind of prioritizing it that way?
I think that there's a couple of variables, so it's hard to exactly say. Uh, I think that when you're looking at free agency, that's going to play a big role too in seeing of who does Green Bay get. Granted, they're not going to draft directly off of free agency, but it will open up their options more. That you don't pigeonhole yourself in that. Oh, we need a wide receiver. Oh, we need a cornerback. Oh, we need this or that, because they might end up getting somebody in that position that could be your number one guy, patch for the next 2-3 years. So I think that depending on value, looking at this draft, I doubt that wide receiver goes in the first round, just because I don't see them pulling the trigger on Ibuka. Maybe if what was his name? The kid out of Arizona, um, Haro McMillan or something. It's something like that.
Oh, yeah, it's. I actually have it on the board here. Uh, Tetairoa. Tutoria,
Oh,
maybe.
Petuo. Petuo.
Okay, yeah,
Sure, let's go with
that's
that.
true. Mr. McMillan, I know you're not watching, so we don't have to worry about offending you. But yeah, that one is kind of difficult.
I feel I feel like it.
For
Say if there's a giant fall for him. Say if he makes it into, your late teens to 20 range, maybe they finally move up, because he's a guy that has everything that Green Bay needs. Higgins, like I said, range wise, I don't see a lot of people predicting him going in the first round. Although you can pull the trigger with that. So, but like I said, depending on what happens in free agency, like say a magical guy who maybe played for the Packers beforehand ends up coming back with MVS. So we might have that reunion going, that we might not have such a pressing need. But yeah, no, if
I hope
I
I hope that's not the case.
you don't like MVS,
No, I don't think NVS is a wide receiver that,
he's
to
a wide
me,
receiver. You're right.
yes, he is. So that is a fact. No, he's a guy to me that worked really well with Aaron Rodgers over the span of time, because Aaron Rodgers was a lot better at throwing the deep ball, where he was just wide open because of his speed a lot of the time. But like Jordan Love doesn't have necessarily the same arm. Not that he can't throw the deep ball, but it's not the same capacity as Aaron Rodgers is going to be, and I don't think he's going to get enough looks where he would be absolutely a difference maker for the Packers.
Kyle, Kyle, what have we talked about literally this whole season? Is that Jordan Love does nothing but play hero ball. He launches it downfield, and you need a field stretcher. You need a guy that can respect speed. That's why people love DK Metcalf so much, because DK Metcalf is good at just running a go route, going straight, not side to side. Agility is terrible, but just going out there and stretching the field. MVS is a field stretcher and hell of a blocker. When in Matt LaFleur's system, was able to play. He was a 6th round pick that out of everybody they picked that year, because I remember they picked I forget his name, a guy out of the 4th round. He ended up being a bust. And then they also picked up an Equanimous St. Brown in that draft. And MVS was the star who shined. I think MVS, he's had some bad quarterback play with the Saints. Josh Allen, he didn't click with as much. He won a couple rings with Patrick Mahomes. So I think that it's a number 3 option. There's a couple of guys I like a lot more than MVS coming to Green Bay in free agency, but if you're telling me that MVS helps stretch the field, I don't hate it. $5 million a year, I don't hate it.
We'll see. I'm not big on it. I don't love bringing back what's already left. To be quite honest with you, that's kind of my stance on things. And even if you're still a very talented player and you can catch touchdown passes at this point, like I don't think we're at the point of like complete desperation. I think that we have guys that are playmakers. And I do like the receiving core for Green Bay. It's just that we have an inability to stay healthy right now at that position, which is kind of limiting the things that we can do at the wide receiver position. So like and we need somebody to emerge as a clear leader, a clear number one, and somebody who can come out there and have an attitude problem and say, like, I'm going to be that guy. Like the same kind of guy that Devontae Adams was when he first hit the league with Rodgers, was just that, like, man, no one can cover this guy. It doesn't matter if we know what's coming, like, they can't stop him. And, like, to me, like, we've already touched the names a couple of times. If we're going to go wide receiver draft wise, like, especially in the first round, like I'm really seeing Ibuka and Matthew Golden as two very viable options for the Green Bay Packers. But like you're saying, like, is it going to necessarily happen? I have no idea.
Well, that's play this game. So apparently, you just don't like if an ex texts you, you're just gonna block them right away. So let's get Devonte Adams. Devonte Adams late night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You had a couple to drink. You get that text. You up? Are you blocking Devonte?
Yeah, you got to block Devontae.
You gotta block Devonte.
Yeah, I'm blocking Devontae right away.
Oh
You know,
man,
I'm not going to exchange words with him or anything like that. I'm not even going to give him the satisfaction of thinking that I would entertain it at some point down the line should he text me from another number
what
or
if
something like.
he sends you a text of green and gold shoes and cleats that he's wearing, and those cleats
Yeah,
look real good, Kyle?
yeah, but I would say, yeah, I've had that. I'm on to something else here, something bigger and better. And truthfully, like, all jokes aside, like, is Devontae still talented enough to come in and catch 10 touchdown passes in a year? Like, yeah, absolutely. But who's also like probably going to do that exact same thing uh, this next year? It could be a number of guys for Green Bay. It could be Dalps. It could be Dontavian Wicks. Like, it could be a few different people that like may emerge as your go-to guy that are talented enough to do so, but just haven't had that kind of season yet. Are quite to that threshold for the Green Bay Packers. So, and then you're talking about adding another, like you're saying, a guy to stretch the field. Now, if you had a DK, to me, that's much, much more superior than an MVS or even a Devonte Adams at this point, based purely on athletic ability and age.
Oh yeah.
So I think that like a DK would be huge, and then a second round acquisition at wide receiver or something like that for the Green Bay Packers would be huge. But it just depends, man. And like I don't want to hyper fixate on the receiver thing and get my hopes way up here for it because I just know that the likelihood of us actually taking a receiver in the first round is just not really there, unless some things fall right to us. And even then, I would still expect the Packers to make some surprising decisions rather than take a chance on a wide receiver in the first round. So we'll see what happens. All in all, like I want to give us a chance here to kind of dive into uh, what if you had to pick, Dave, positionally for the Green Bay Packers, what do you think the most pressing need is? So like at
It
uh,
it sorry if I interrupt you. I'm sorry here.
yep,
I got one last point with that, and I'll put it to bed. I would just
all right.
argue with roster building, you only every offseason you have so much salary cap and you have so much draft capital. And the difference between DK is with DK you have to give up a third round pick probably and you pay him $30 million a year. So now you're not getting any other free agents at this point, and you've given up draft capital. DK is the number one option athletically, but he's also going to be 29. I think that after that 30 range is typically when we don't look at wide receivers fondly anymore. So you're going to pay him $30 million and then also give up capital where you could get MVS, who is not as good, and we both agree on that. But MVS would be no draft pick, and you're getting only 5 million. So you can get him. You could get an edge rusher in free agency, and you could get a cornerback in free agency as well. So that's the only thing I'll put on that. I agree with you. DK is the best option wide receiver wise, but it's just how much can you orient? How much can you allocate to everybody?
Well, when we talked in the last couple of months, like I was pretty big on T. Higgins, and we talked about the price of what T. Higgins would be, and probably much steeper than even DK would have been. And they franchise tagged him now, so that like he's in that position where likely a contract is coming for him. And if it's not, he's really unhappy. Like he's gonna have to, figure that out futuristically speaking. But so I had to kind of shift off of my T. Higgins. I was kind of high up on that ladder, thinking that like happen for the Packers. It's just not going to happen. So then I kind of shifted like, well, where else would I go if I was going to go into free agency? And really, the best thing to come out of free agency thus far that I can see at the receiver position is certainly a DK type player where you're not getting your guy who's at his in his prime anymore, but you're also not getting a slouch like a guy that who's like he's not even like a Keenan Allen. Really, he's
Mm.
much better even positionally than a Keenan Allen's going to be because he still has the speed. The man was running in the Olympics or like running Olympic trials like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like he's got the speed, he's got the athleticism, he's still a freak. And he's looking for a place to play. And when, in my mindset, when guys are looking for a new place, when they're looking for a new home, and they're happy with where they go, they get some say in where they want to go. Typically, those guys end up performing pretty well no matter what their age gap is. And I think they're a little bit more motivated to play for that organization when they have a say in where they're going to end up. So, if that's somewhere that he's really intent on being, I think that it'll get done, and it'll just be a matter of what the cost is going to be at the end of the day and what we can work out. Let's not forget that we have some guys that may, potentially be involved in a trade like that if they are interested in some, of these guys that really aren't making a huge splash in Green Bay, but that would be valuable for the Seattle Seahawks. Um, come regular season time. And I would hate to see some of these younger guys be given up for for a DK Metcalf, but also at the same time, like, would you sacrifice a Dontavion Wicks potentially for and like maybe like a fifth rounder for a
I
DK Metcalf?
I don't think that Jonathan Schneider's taking that. I think that somebody else. I think that you have a New England Patriots will outbid that in a second. I think that bare minimum, you're giving up a third round pick, and you're giving
Yeah,
up
but
either.
the Patriots are going to pick up a Travis Hunter, man. They're going to pick up Travis Hunter. So
Yeah, but
I
Travis Hunter, they're leaning more towards being a cornerback than a wide receiver.
even if that's so, man, like he's a very versatile player. Like
Yeah,
he doesn't have a positional assignment for this draft necessarily, one over the other. So I don't know. I think that I think that the Patriots are an organization that's kind of working in a rebuilding setting right now, and that like having him as an acquisition no matter where he is. So I think they'll take him.
yeah.
I just I don't know, man. There's so many variables with like this draft stuff that it really does get interesting to like kind of break it down. But what I need to know now, Dave, is positionally, what is the Packers' greatest need?
If I if I'm drafting today, no free agents, no blah blah blah. If I'm going in there as the Green Bay Packers, I am picking a defensive tackle with my first overall pick. I am
Really?
picking, yep, because looking at Kenny Clark last year, he ended up getting a new contract, but he regressed. He's only gotten, I feel like we feel Kenny's young, but he's also played a lot of football. Like Kenny's in his like ninth, 10th season already. Kenny's not going to play forever. So, say if we play one more year with him and we cut ties with him, then you're looking at, well, who else do we have? Wyatt is on his last year of his deal. Does he get an extension? TJ Slayton, he's already going to be a free agent this year. So you look and you're like, within next year, our defensive tackle group could be completely different. It could be day and night from what we're looking at right now. So Packers are always the type of team that they get a year early and they get a year ahead of it. So knowing the defensive tackles that are coming out of this draft, whether you have Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, dog. You have Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, dog. And you have my personal favorite, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Kenneth Grant is 340 pounds, and he was able to chase a running back from behind and tackle this man on a screen. It was a wheel route. The quarterback throws it to the running back and he goes, and this 340-pound just semi of a man was able to chase this running back down and tackle him. This man is absolutely insane. He looks the part out of Michigan. He kind of played second fiddle because they have Mason. I forget Mason's last name. He's going to be a top
Mason Mason Graham.
Mason Graham. Yeah, Mason Graham's going to be a top 10 pick in this draft. He kind of has more of your Jalen Carter prototype, where Kenneth Walker or Kenneth, yeah. So he's
You're saying Jalen Walker prototype. Or are you
yeah,
saying Abdul? there's there's a lot of Carters and Jalen's
yeah.
coming out.
So basically, basically, I really, really like guy out of Michigan. I think that he's going to go out there and he's going to just be a monster. He's great in the pass rush. He's going to be a dog in running snaps. You know, you look last year, you had Tavondre Sweat coming out of Texas. He was another one that was like 340, 350, and he helped their run defense immediately. So you give me Kenneth Graham. I think that he's going to go out there and he's going to do amazing.
Yeah, that's an interesting take too. Like obviously with the positional needs being now like for this, I broke down what I think that's going to happen in the first round for the Packers based on what their largest need and is, excuse me, what their largest need is. But being like that, it is like an edge, cornerback, wide receiver type. A lot of people are very high on Siobhan Revel Jr. out of ECU. Dave, do you have any hesitation with taking a guy out of a university like ECU where maybe necessarily they haven't had the competition level that a lot of these corners have that are going to be in this draft?
Siobhan Rebel is an interesting case because he does look the part. He's very lengthy. He's very athletic, but he's also coming off a torn ACL this year. So this last year, he hasn't played for the majority of the year. And when you're looking at competition, a lot of scouts look back at that game against Michigan a few years back. I believe it was two, and he had a good game, but that was really his only tape against a good team was against Michigan 2 years ago. So you're going to be betting a lot on a first round pick if you're going Siobhan Rebel. Lengthy, fast. We don't know how fast because he didn't run in the combine. He'll probably end up running first pro day. Pro day numbers are always, you give the coaches that give a little bit of extra on the clicking of the buttons and such. So they fluff up the times quite a little bit. But I I like Siobhan Rebel, but if I'm going to bet on a corner coming out that's got an injury history, I'd rather go Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. It's more your traditional lockdown guy, played elite competition. He had a hip injury that ended up hurting his draft stock. He would have probably been a top 10 pick this year if he hadn't have injured that hip. Revel's a good guy. If they ended up getting him in, say, a second round or even a third, depending on how everything falls out, no problem at all. But at 23, that might be a little bit rich.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear you talk about it because it's definitely a different take than I've taken on it positionally. I don't have a problem with them taking a corner in the first round. Obviously, my personal preference is for them to take a wide receiver and just kind of change it up and shake it up and show the fans that they're going to support the narrative that this really does need some kind of offensive shift in terms of the wide receiver position and that the organization is willing to take some chances on some guys sometimes. I think that you need that just because we become so closed off as Packer fans to the fact that those kind of guys can get drafted by the Green Bay Packers. It's a matter of the organization be willing to pull the trigger when it comes down to it, and maybe even come off of a little bit some guys that they're very high on, which is tough to do. It's tough to do when you're looking, probably not just necessarily at your first round. The first round's probably a lot easier to draft in, just depending on how the cards fall. But your later rounds are where your money makers are, and it's probably Packers to come off some of those guys to take a chance on somebody else and really go get them when, sometimes you might have to trade up. You might have to make some sacrifices. So we'll see. I would love, as far as a positional need for the Green Bay Packers, like I still see that defensively as the biggest thing. I don't see the wide receiver as the biggest need. And we talked about before saying that your first round is your, like, hey, what do I need the most? Or what's the best available for some teams? If you don't need anything in particular, you're just like rolling along. You're the Philadelphia Eagles, like, or you're coming off a championship year or near championship year. Like maybe you don't need a whole lot. Maybe you're just taking the best thing that's available at the time. But for the Green Bay Packers, I see it as a difficult thing. I see it as, like you're saying, I see a defensive tackle as a need. I see an edge rusher as a need. I see a cornerback, a linebacker as a need. Somebody that can fill in for Quay Walker because, for the love of God, something needs to change there. And, I could see it going anyway. I could see it being even a defensive guy that we really aren't foreseeing necessarily in the first round. But I would love to see them take, some kind of D lineman like you're saying. Is it what I think? Probably not. I see the biggest need right now, if you're talking about next season, as an edge. And so we'll see what that looks like. I wish we were higher on the board. I wish we could have a difference maker like Abdul Carter come into the picture. It's just not going to happen for us. Really, what's going to happen inevitably, probably in this draft, is that the Cleveland Browns are going to lose Myles Garrett and they're going to acquire Abdul Carter. So really, they've lost absolutely nothing. In fact, they probably gained a lot more by letting him go, because letting another team assume the contract negotiation stuff with him is going to be a lot easier on Cleveland than it is keeping him there and paying the man the money that he deserves, because these contracts are getting huge for these guys. And Myles Garrett's a guy that deserves the money. It's just what, organizationally, like, are you gonna like pay him and stick around for whatever the outcome of the year is going to be if you're not going to be a winning organization? I don't know.
And that's the thing. Myles Garrett wants to be a winner, and the Browns just don't want to get rid of him because that's if you're a Browns fan, Myles Garrett is literally your last player that you have hope in. And
Yeah, especially when you're talking about like your Max Crosbys that are getting paid now too, like absolutely absurd money, and it's like, like what is the price? What is the price of keeping this guy stick around when really potentially at the number 2 pick we can take the best defensive edge rusher that we're going to see all draft.
yeah,
So Cleveland's in a good place. They'll probably let Myles Garrett go. He'll be somewhere else. It's just
I,
a
I
matter of
think
what.
it might get ugly with Garrett. I think that the Browns are gonna kind of hold on and be like, "Hey, we're not getting rid of you. We're not." I think it's gonna get a little ugly. I think this one could go into
Yeah,
the season.
no negotiations are looking like right now. And we'll see. Like I don't think that's one that like they necessarily have a huge loss on. Like as a player, as a person, like as a fan base, you'd be super sad to see him go. But like as an organization, like I'd be like, I don't know. We're losing probably one of the best guys currently in the NFL. We're going to gain another one that's going to be one of the best, and even could be one of the best this year.
Yeah,
So really, I don't see it as a huge loss. But I would love to see an edge. Who that is at this point, I don't know. We're going to actually move on to that here right now. So, Dave, give me right now the number one. Actually, give me the number one pick in the draft. So the Titans are choosing first. I already kind of gave my take earlier, so I won't even chime in on this. The Titans are picking first. Who is the number one overall pick in this year's draft?
I don't know. Cam Ward, Amir Abdullah. I don't. Shador saying I don't care about the top of the draft, man. I like. I mean, all power to whoever's gonna go and pick them and everything. But I see Cam Ward, I see Shador Sanders, and I see quarterbacks that yeah they could be great or they could just be bust that 10 years or even not even 10. They could be 3 4 years. You're looking, you're like,
I
why
think
the heck?
I think Cam Ward's a good bet. I think that the Titans probably need him more than anything. I think that's a good fit. I think he's probably the best quarterback in the draft. Cam Ward is. I know some people would argue, sure, Sanders. I just like athletically, like great, maybe a Michael Vick type guy down the road. But like right now, at this stage, like starting first year, like am I convinced? Like based on college performances, like I'd say that he has more of an upside than a downside right now.
Yeah,
But like as far as longevity in the NFL and like is he going to be a great? I don't know. That's just kind of a question mark for me. So
you know
I
what?
think
One
Cam
thing.
Ward.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just think Cam Ward's the best guy. That's all.
Yeah. No, one thing we can do too is say, I don't know if we ask our fans, the three people who are watching this, if they want us to do a mock draft. We could do a mock draft, me and you separately, and then explain our picks and our reasonings why. That'll probably be a show all in itself, even because we have a lot of different ideas for all season content. We just actually have to do it. That's been a little bit my fault with the whole baby situation, but it's, we can touch on that. But I think for Green Bay, that's who I primarily want to focus on right now because
Yeah. So let's do that. So let's go. Let's shift then. Um, Cam Ward's going to go number one. It's okay to the Titans. Sorry, it's going to
Okay,
happen.
cool.
So
Hey, congratulations, Cam Ward. You just became number one pick in the NFL draft.
um, the Packers at number not the Packers at number one, but the 23rd pick, first round, Green Bay Packers. Who is it? Shout it out. What's going
Dun
to happen,
dun
Dave?
dun 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 dun.
The pick is in.
And we're going strictly edge rusher.
No. You pick whoever you think is going to go number one for the Packers.
I would say, knowing the Packers, I think it's going to be Derek Harmon, the tackle out of Oregon, D tackle. Very, very solid pass rusher. He's able to meet all the athletic traits that they have. He's not the biggest guy. I believe that he's like 310, 305, 310. That's typically more in the range that they go for. They don't go for the big meaty boys like I like. So he's a penetrator. He's more of a three tech. I think he would rotate snaps with Kenny, and he'd be a guy that if he does impress, he'll probably end up taking over more. And then he'll probably be the guy that once they release Kenny ends up being your next D tackle for the Green Bay Packers. Edgewise, there's the guy out of Texas A&M I like a lot, Nick Scorton. I think that he lost a lot of weight. He was playing before around 280. He came to the draft about 265, a little bit more natural weight. He did a pretty good job in the combine. He didn't blow it up by any means, but athletically he meets all their traits. He meets everything that they need. He had solid production in Texas A&M. I think that he'd be a decent pick. I think that any of your Ohio State guys, we like Jack Sawyer. This is a very, very pro Jack Sawyer show. But one thing that came out in the combine is Jack Sawyer has freakishly small arms. So, and that's big for the next level. And it's a lot of the press that's happened with Jack Sawyer is coming into this combine process is a lot of guys think that he's reached his peak. They think that he is what he's going to be. He's not going to be a guy that you can take and off of what he has, you can develop more. He's just going to be your guy that he goes in there, he plays hard, he does his thing, he ramps up some sacks, but athletically, he's always going to be limited. So I think that Jack Sawyer might end up taking a little bit of a tumble. Like he might be that guy that falls to like the third, fourth round, where before we were just like, oh my God, how? Because we got hyped up in the college football playoff. It's like he just had a strip sack and returned it for a touchdown against Texas. How could he go this late? But he's a guy that I think that later on in the draft could prove a lot of guys wrong. But no, athletically right now, if you're going edge, I really like Nick Scorton.
So, I know that you said, like you like the Derek Harmon pick. A lot of people have him going at 17 to the Cincinnati Bengals, as they're in need of some defensive help on the line, especially with with whatever debacle's going on with Hendrickson at the moment, if he's going to be playing in a different jersey this next year or not. And there's Walter Nolan as well that you're saying that would probably be another good acquisition there for the Green Bay Packers if they're going to take a D lineman. But again, like that's another dicey one because we're looking at a few good defensive linemen here, right away, where there's other teams, like even in this projected draft that I'm looking at here over to my left, it has Walter Nolan going to the Broncos at 20.
Yeah,
So,
Walter Nolan's probably one of my least favorite D tackles out of those first round guys. I think that he's another one, but probably the Packers type. He's a little bit thinner. He's a try hard. He's great at run defense. I just think that
so you really have. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, really, you have two other guys that are below the Packers, in this projection, and those two guys are going to be both Big Ten guys. So
Yep.
power to them. All power to the Big Ten. But you have Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, who really is right now projected to go to the Texans at 25, and then you have
Kenneth Grant's my boy. That's my pick. If Dave
and then you
is the GM, Kenneth Grant comes out of Green Bay Packer.
Tyleik Williams out of OSU, who's projected to go to the Vikings, which is at 31 actually. So those are two great picks, I think, for the Green Bay Packers. If that's going to be the case, I could definitely see that being a D lineman. I'm really, really conflicted as to what I think the Packers are going to do here because so many people are predicting corner or D linemen, and I just like as far as edge rushers go, like that would be my preferred position for them to pick. But like, are any of these guys that I think that are really, really going to be your first round edge rushers going to be available when the Packers come time to pick? So like if you get never in a million years is Abdul Carter going to ever fall to the Green Bay Packers at 23. So like everybody should just get that out of their head right now, especially with the Cleveland situation. So let's just wash that right away.
Yeah,
You have a Jalen Walker out of Georgia who is probably one of the best edges in this draft. And you have him probably going top 10. To be honest with you, I'd be shocked if the Panthers or the Saints didn't pick him at 8 or 9. I'd be shocked. The Bears are worried about all linemen, so I wouldn't worry about them going anything before 10. But I think he's in that 1 to 10 range as far as Jalen Walker is concerned. So I don't think you're losing two edge rushers in the top 10 right away. And then from there you have Mikael Williams out of Georgia, and you have James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. And then like you have next to nothing aside from maybe Mike Green out of Marshall down the road as another viable edge rusher. But I just think it's really tough, man, to like try to get an edge rusher that you're really convinced is going to do well right away if it's not one
Mike
of
Green, you can scratch right off the bat because Mike Green is 235 pounds and he's got character concerns with a couple of alleged things that are alleged. If anybody wants to look it up, they can. But yeah, no, Mike Green, I would be very, very shocked if Mike Green became a Green Bay Packer in the first round of this draft. And then James Pierce
yeah.
also, he blew up the combine, but he's another one that has character concerns. A lot of GMs have talked really bad about him, saying that he's just one of those guys that he's going to be a cancer in the locker room. I don't see Green Bay doing that. Another guy he's too light. Green Bay notoriously goes after guys who are at least 250, 260, bare minimum. 250 is honestly at the lighter end. So then you start getting guys that are 230, 240. It's not really Green Bay's type.
Yeah, I haven't looked at all the heights and weights of these guys and all the physical attributes. That's something that I know you dive much deeper into than I do. I haven't got the opportunity to do too many mock drafts yet, so I haven't really been focused or like hyper fixated on positional stuff necessarily outside of what I think Green Bay is going to do and what mold a certain player is going to fit. That's something that you have to always take into account with these drafts is like not just the positional needs, but what does the organization of itself want? Like you're saying, the Green Bay has a certain mold for every positional type, and they want a locker room guy too that's going to be decent. That's shown over the years quite a bit, and I think they produced really great guys out of that, really great franchise guys who want to stay in the franchise, which is important. We don't have a bunch of guys that are always trying to walk out the door and saying they like we hate this organization. So I think that you have a great culture. It's just they want guys to kind of come in and be able to adapt right away, and makes it kind of difficult. I don't know, man. I'm not solely convinced on anybody. I like your take a lot. I'm just gonna say for the sake of this argument, I would like to see Kenneth Grant as a Green Bay Packer coming out on the D line in the first round. I think that'd be fantastic. If not, my backup pick for sure would be Matthew Golden out of Texas. Very high on him. Very high on Ibuka as well. One of those three to me would be like a dream draft scenario where I've gotten everything that I want as a fan because I know and I watched every game last season and I saw how atrocious we were on just like the defensive line and our ability to get pressure on the quarterback. So if we can amp that up right away with a good first rounder, I think that's phenomenal. You kind of fill some needs down the road and don't have to worry so much about what you're going to replace next year if you take a D lineman in the first round right away this year. Um, and you also negate some of your wide receiver concerns if you were to take a wide receiver. So we'll see what happens there. Going to be interesting to see if wide receiver becomes less of a need for the Green Bay Packers, just solely dependent on what they do with DK and some of these other guys are kind of lingering around and
Yeah.
going to be most likely
Uh,
some other.
do you have the name of the edge of the guy from Boston College? It's a hard name to pronounce.
Well, I already jacked up one today.
He's
It
Boston.
depends on where they. It depends where they were projected, and I'm not seeing anybody from.
He's he's Boston College. He played under our current defensive coordinator. He was he was a guy that Halfley was big on. It's like it's a hard one. It's like Ovatrichiadio or some. It's a goofy one. It's definitely hard for me to pronounce, being a white man from the Midwest. But he's another one that he's 260. Dude's built like a stud. He's a little bit shorter. He's 6'2". He's kind of got like that stocky build that can get underneath. I think that if Halfley really were to bang the drum, the Packers might go that way for edge. So might want to do a little bit of research on him, or anybody who's watching this, maybe check him out. That could be a sneaky pick, one of those guys that when they call his name, you as a fan go, who? But it's been in the works. It's been looked at. It's something that it's not so sneaky as in, to them, it's just more of a surprise for the casual fan. But he's
Yeah,
somebody to look at. But yeah, no, it's predicting draft. It's going to be hard, and especially I feel like once we get some clarity after free agency, we're going to be able to really narrow it in a lot better too.
yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like we talked about before, so much of this, what I have on a sheet of paper here, is not going to like. It's great. It's great to familiarize yourself with names, with players, where they're coming out of. Maybe some teams that you've seen play in college football this past year, and guys that you notice that stand out to you on paper. And that's kind of the little like spiral, the downward spiral we get into as fans. Sometimes we want some of these guys so bad because we watched them play in college, and we've realized that they're difference makers in college. But really, the the needs of an organization are quite different than what we want as fans quite often. And I've had to come to terms with that over the years. Is that even when people were very big on Hyatt coming out of the draft, I wanted Green Bay to snag him, and wide receiver was still kind of on my radar. And it's just something that didn't happen. And you got to accept that as a fan. Sometimes it's like, hey, like my desired outcome isn't going to be the same as what their desired outcome is for this draft. Uh, and you got to kind of trust the process in that way. And I've been trying to do that more and more over the last couple of years as a fan. So,
And
all
and the
right.
thing is you get guys that you really like, and they don't always pan out. I remember back in the day, I didn't really care for Ha Ha Clinton Dix. I love the name, but I really wanted Calvin Pryor, and he was safety out of Louisville at the time. Calvin Pryor only played a couple of years for the Jets and bounced out of the NFL. Ha Ha had a pretty remarkable career back in Green Bay, and then bounced around on the other teams that he played in too. So
We're going to skip over our Jair Packers segment for today. We'll cover that a different time, especially with free agency coming up. Obviously, the relationship with Jair Alexander has kind of been severed. It looks like it was kind of down, then up, then back down again. So looks like he's not going to play for the team. What we get out of that whole thing come down the line is kind of up in question at this point. I think he's not going to be in a Packers uniform. So you Packers fans out there that are watching this, just know Jair probably is not going to be in a Packers uniform this next year. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to accept right now. I have the jersey, so I'm hurt as well. But it is what it is. That's kind of on him at this point, and his inability to be able to stay healthy. Sometimes it's just a business decision rather than a personal vendetta. And that's kind of how I see this going
and
down the
sometimes
line.
it's a
So
personal vendetta.
yeah, sometimes it is a personal vendetta. We'll see. Maybe there's stuff that comes out afterwards, but
Yeah.
Packers have done a good job years of trying to mend things that they feel like have been broken, specifically with even this past year with Romeo Doubs and some of the personal stuff he had going on. So they're willing to work through stuff. You just have to be reasonable. But it seems like this one's one where they're just ready to cut ties, and they're just going to have to see what they can get for him at the end of the day. It might not be something great, but it's better than having a locker room cancer and some struggles there. So we'll just kind of skip over that for today.
Yep.
One last thing to wrap up, Dave. There is a certain player, a certain older man who's probably on a Ihuska retreat as we speak.
I
Yeah, well, I don't know how to properly say it. I've heard it said 1,000 times. I still don't know how to pronounce it. But there's a man who is probably smoking in excess a lot of drugs that I don't even know about at this very moment in time, preparing for the next NFL season. His name is Aaron Rodgers. We are familiar with him very greatly in Green Bay. He seems to intend on playing this next year for somebody. There was a lot of speculation around where. I heard some people on the radio talking about, they thought that potentially he'd be a Raider. He wants to go back to the West Coast. Max Crosby was kind of egging that on. Well, now they got Geno Smith. So the Raiders thing's not going to happen. So we have some other organizations that are looking to acquire a quarterback. I don't see Aaron as a Tennessee guy, especially with Cam Ward on the horizon for them. I see Cleveland in need of a quarterback, but um, could that be something that happens? I don't know. Would he want to stay in the Midwest? I don't know. There's so many unknowns there. The Patriots could even be could even be looking for a quarterback. That'd be crazy to see him go and play in New England. The fans would probably love him there, to be honest. But the question is, if he's going to play somewhere, is there an organization who would take a chance on him, number one? And number two, where does he end up, Dave? Give me just your kind of quick prediction on where he could end up.
I'm going to do a very long rant here, Kyle. Uh, First off, let me ask you what happened yesterday. Who was traded from where?
Geno Smith from the Seattle Seahawks.
Geno Smith was traded from the Seattle Seahawks, and there are connections with a Mr. Sam Darnold. And the Seahawks are potentially suitors for Mr. Darnold and his services because the Vikings don't want to pay Mr. Sam Darnold a long term contract because they have J.J. McCarthy, who they drafted. J.J. McCarthy may not be ready to start right away due to coming off a knee injury. So there happens to be this one team that possibly could be in the NFC North that needs a guy to come in for a year and play to help assist a young rookie. And this team actually is pretty good. They got some pretty good weapons. You know, it might be one of those situations that Aaron thinks that he could still win a championship because does he go to Tennessee? No. Does he go to Cleveland? No. He doesn't go to anywhere where he doesn't get potential for a championship. You're not going to play a year just to play a year. You want to win a ring. And I grew up Southern, Kyle. I grew up from the South. Half my family, straight Arkansas. And there's this hymn, little song. It's called May the Circle Be Unbroken, Kyle. May the circle be unbroken. By and by, Lord, by and by. And you remember the original Circle, Kyle? Do you remember? A Mr. Brett
Brett Favre.
Favre. And what was his trajectory? The Green Bay Packers to the New York Jets to the Minnesota Vikings. May the circle be unbroken. Aaron Rodgers to the skull. May the circle be unbroken. Aaron Rodgers to the skull. Make it happen. I want to see it. I want Aaron Charles Rodgers to sign with the Minnesota Vikings. Please, God, I pray you make this happen. I think it would be very interesting. I think that we would have 2 games a year. That would be the absolute best thing ever. Me and you, guaranteed, would go to that Vikings and Packers game. We would be there at Lambeau Field. That would be the one that we would be hands down. You have to see. I want this more than anything. God, I will turn in all of my birthday presents, all of my Christmas presents, everything for the next eternity. Give me Aaron Charles Rodgers to the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, man. And I actually like, not that we disagree too often, to be honest with you, but that is really one where like the outstanding need for a quarterback is still there. He has been like somewhat of a decent mentor, at least more than Brett Favre was to him, according to their accounts of things. And just the old school mentality that used to be in the NFL, where it was a bit more like, "Hey, rookie, shut your mouth."
Mm-hmm.
But I could see it happening. Obviously, there's some rivalries and stuff there. Could they easily overcome that for the sake of playing a year as one of the best quarterbacks of all time? Absolutely. So, are there other teams that could probably fit in here that could use a quarterback? Sure, like the Colts or maybe one of those.
No, none of them give him a chance at the ring. Not, Kyle, everything. I will give up everything, please, except for Lombardi going to Green Bay. That's the one thing I will not give up. But
You know, the Seahawks are in need of a quarterback, Dave. I think the Buccaneers found their guy in Baker, which is great. Um, there's a lot of teams here that I'm looking at down this list that like are just set at that position. They're not going to give up anything for a quarterback at this point. And even like if I mean, just to humor you for a second, right? Like Eagles, good. Like Vikings, not so much, right? We just talked about that. Bills set, Commanders set, Vikings set, Ravens set, Rams good. Like we could go down and down the list. And I'm looking at this list where like, yeah, there's a vacancy in Seattle. Uh, like again, the Falcons are a question mark because who knows what Kirk Cousins does, but they're going to hold on to him. They're going to probably hope and pray that he produces something in Atlanta, so they're going to hold on to that. Everybody else, like that I'm looking at, Colts, Dolphins, Cowboys, 49ers, Bears, like all good. Panthers even set. Like Jets, he's not going back there. The Raiders are now set. That was a big question mark. The Patriots are going to do whatever Patriots decide to do. And the Giants are likely drafting a quarterback. So like you're like Cleveland to me, like if you were to list the teams that Aaron Rodgers could play for come this next year, it would be the Cleveland Browns, the New England Patriots, uh, or potentially the New Orleans Saints.
you could
Just
throw the
depending on
Steelers
how
in there too, probably.
I think they're holding on to Russ, right?
I don't know what they're going to do, but
Like that's a question mark. That's as much of a question mark to me as Atlanta is, to be honest with you. Like
hmm.
maybe yes, maybe it doesn't really matter. But then the Vikings are that fourth one. And if you talk about a suitor, like a true suitor for Aaron Rodgers, I think the Vikings fits. Now, is he going to be petty and not want to go there just because it is going full circle? Maybe so. I'm not going to sing the
The
song.
circle be unbroken.
Um,
By and by, Lord,
I'm gonna,
by and by.
that is a perfect way to end this. I wish I had like this song on cue right now so I could just play it over the podcast. It could just slowly fade out
Do it
while
in
playing that.
post.
Dave, can you just sing it? Can you just sing it quieter and we can just fade out to that real quick? That'd be great.
May the circle be unbroken. By and by, Lord, by
This is the off-season
and
podcast of
by.
Lambeau Lounge. We love you guys. We
May
appreciate you.
the
Dave,
circle
we'll see you guys next time.
be unbroken.